What up, though? I am Jay the Gentleman. That's at JAI the Gentleman on IG. And this is another episode of Dear Black Gay Men Live. It's our short, bullshit-free step out of our comfort zone to talk everything important in Black gay culture. We're starting to build real community here on Dear Black Gay Men. All of our comments, all of your questions, your DMs, your emails teach me two lessons. The first is the girls got a lot they want to talk about. And the second is straight people go through a lot of the same shit. I get so many messages from straight people telling me that they either want to show up for and activate for their gay friends and relatives a lot better, or they're learning from us sharing our stories. So today I'm talking to two of the dopest straight people that I might know in an episode that we are calling Allies Explained. Now, let's get into the episode. I'm calling my guests today our resident straight people. Lewis has a voice that will make the strongest knees weak. And Marissa is what you get if head bitch in charge was a person. Hey, y'all. Are you there?
We are.
We are.
Do y'all hear that voice? Okay, got it. Before I get too verklempt, how are you?
Doing very well.
Doing good.
Dr. Marissa, how are you? You hanging in
we
there?
Here.
Now you're doing amazing things. Both of you are on either side of the country doing amazing things for the culture. Do you feel that you're making a difference? I'll start with you, Doc.
Yes, I always feel every time I go to a conference, it's almost like a cookout, a homecoming, a family reunion, if you will. And it's a constant reminder that I am constantly surrounded by, very senior leaders. And sometimes when we're looking at the data all the time, every time we're looking at demographics, we're looking at the epi, we don't get to have that community connection. And so seeing my family, my public health workforce, my brothers and sisters always makes me reminded and, enlightened and feel this ignition of power and feeling like I am making a difference. And collaborating and being on this podcast is just another check box to do that.
Well, we're going to be talking a lot more about who you are in the culture. But Lewis, do you feel like you're making a difference? Do you feel it?
I hope I am. I hope I am. Being able to connect with so many beautiful Black people, beautiful people of color, and just is my goal in life. And I hope that in doing that, we're able to share about the science, share about how we can overcome stigma, share about how we can overcome all the things that hold us back in life. And so I'm hopeful that the things that I do really do matter. And I think opportunities like this show me that they do.
So since we're early in the show, let me be very clear. Y'all are in my ear. And so, Lewis, when you go into this lower register, this Isaac Hayes moment, it really does feel like you're whispering to me. And then my gay ass is up here with Dr. Marissa on the other ear. And I'm like, this is the craziest threesome I have ever been in, ever. So I just want to throw that out there so we can break the ice and let you know that I'm listening to what you're saying, but I'm listening to what you're saying.
We have your undivided attention, and we love
you
that.
have my undivided attention. Okay, so every episode we start by running through some of the questions that crept up in the DMs. Are y'all ready for this?
Oh, yes.
Woo! Yes.
Okay, so these aren't specific to the work that we do. We'll talk about that a little later. But the first question is it a good idea to keep in touch with your exes? What do you think? I'll start with you, Doc.
No, we can start with Lewis. That's fine.
Okay. Y'all the guests. I'm just running the show. But go ahead, Lewis. Is it a good idea to keep in touch with your exes?
I would love to keep in touch with my exes. My exes don't really want to keep in touch with me for whatever reason. So
You're not toxic, are you, Lewis?
I don't think so. I feel like it's just, I'm a Cancer, so I feel like it's just a lot to lose me. So
okay. Now I will say, I got some exes that don't want to keep in touch with me because they like, why would I do that? I can't have you. So I'm like,
yeah,
who fault is that?
It'd be like that sometimes.
What about you? Go ahead. In general, what?
In general, I think it can be good. I think if you can establish a nice friendship with your ex, I've seen it work. It just hasn't worked for me.
Is that some straight people shit though?
I can only give you straight people shit. That's what I do.
Oh yeah, that's right. Because you're straight.
Well, I don't necessarily
why that was news to me. Like, you are straight. I just called you our resident straight person, and here I am like, he don't know anything but straight people shit. Okay, got it. Okay, it's taking me a minute to get acclimated. But go ahead, Doc. Well, Kate, is it a good idea to keep in touch with your exes?
No. Personally, for me, most of the time it's mess. Most of the time, if you keep in touch, you want it to be something platonic. You want to do it as something for work, or you want to keep things professional, or just as friends. There's always that gray area. And when something resonates with you of like the past, and then it never is healthy. So for me personally, no. But for some, that have to co-parent, for some that might have some other external factors, they might need to keep in touch with their exes for family purposes, for other reasons, for health challenges, for other things. So I think we can't just put it in a box and say, generally, can you keep in touch? I think it really is on a case-by-case basis, and it depends on the maturity of the couple, and then also what was the experience. Was there domestic violence? Was there mental health issues? Like, was there codependency? Some of those other factors you really have to take a look at. And in the Black community, a lot of times we shy away from mental health issues and some of the things that we're triggered by, or things that really aren't healthy for us. So if we're really going to have this conversation and be real, we really have to unpack all of that first. But in general, for me, no. But for some, maybe.
Those are both of you have very evolved answers. And I wonder, is a piece of that because you work with the people? Doc, well, I'm coming back to you. Like, is a piece, because you are a doctor, you work in public health, you work in this arena where you're dealing with people with varying life issues happening, right? Mm-hmm. And so are you able to have this kind of evolved perspective on that because of your experience, or is that just you, homegirl, that's telling your Judy, let that man go?
No, because I'm constantly, telling homegirls or telling line sisters, or having conversations, and it's like, girl, what are we doing? This is silly. It doesn't make sense.
Silly.
For others, it might make sense. But from a community aspect, and from a person that has lived experiences, but also as somebody who has been hurt, who has been cheated on, who has been played, those factors play a role into your dependency, or just the breakdown of your self-esteem. And sometimes it's the ego stroke. You keep your exes in the atmosphere. Sometimes it's other factors that are not healthy and really aren't sustainable for you to actually be a mature human being. But that's another podcast episode.
Yes, it is. Okay, so here's another one. Along the same lines with exes, I'm going to come to you, Lewis, for this one. How long before a man regrets losing his partner?
Oh, yes, Lewis. I would love to hear it. Yes.
I mean, we're talking about a long-term loving partnership, some type of long-term loving partnership.
Yeah, we're not talking about no hookup. This isn't a one and done. This is somebody who has mattered in your life. How long do you think before a man regrets losing this person?
It's the regret part for me. It's it's the regret part, because you can mourn a loss. Like a loss, you feel that immediately. I feel like
Okay.
anybody who matters in your life, anybody you could say that you love, and I don't know if we want to get into that word, but going from loss to regret, that's a whole nother topic, I feel like. And to regret something like that, you have to regret losing a partner, you have to feel like maybe you've made a mistake, and that could be you made a mistake in a relationship, or you made a mistake in letting go of that person. And so how long does it take for you to feel that way? I think as soon as you feel the need for that person in your life, and that could be a weekend, that could be 2 months, that could be a year, where you really feel that sense of regret. But I'm hopeful that people don't live with those types of regrets very often. Hopefully.
Okay. I mean, is that your Cancer talking? Is that your emotionally centered Cancer vibes? Is that what that is? Or is that like, man?
I don't know. It may be a little bit of the Cancer talking. I think deeply about relationships. I'm in touch. I will say I'm more in touch with my emotions than probably most men. Definitely probably most straight men. And I don't have any qualms with saying that. So I'm willing to put things out there about myself. But yes, that's a tough one though. Regret. Like, oof. That means when I think regret, that means I messed up. And if I messed up, that's just something that's hard to get over. That's hard. That can become a fixation. And so when it comes on is one thing, but how to let it go, how to work through it, that's a whole nother thing.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask a question that ain't on the list. So along those same lines, for you as man and Marissa, you as woman, how often do you think about being masculine, Lewis? Like, how often is that a actual thought, a conscious effort that you make to navigate the world?
It was a big conscious effort for me when I was younger, particularly when I was a teenager. I think not having many examples of masculinity in my life growing up, I grew up without my father being very present in my life. I feel like I had to construct my masculinity. And so in some ways, the masculinity that I built, in some ways, I had to get over the fact that it didn't feel as authentic as other people around me, because it seemed like other guys around me tend to have like this natural masculinity. They were drawn to basketball or football or doing this or doing that, things that were typically masculine. And I didn't feel like I had that same draw, but I wanted to be masculine. I wanted to be part of this culture of masculinity. So I felt like the best way for me to do that was to build it up. So like football is a really good example. Like football wasn't something that was brought to me. Like I literally sought out football and learned it and like immersed myself in it so that I could feel more masculine when I was around other people and when in my teenage years. And so obviously I've grown and I've developed a lot. And so you looking at me like I'm crazy.
No, I'm looking at you like I'm picturing you in like some football cleats and pads and let me not. I don't want to get offensive on here.
Listen, this is a short podcast, Jay. It's a short podcast.
I'm really curious for you, Doc. How often do you think about being feminine? Like that being a conscious effort that you are making?
So growing up, you needed to be ladylike. And I grew up in a way and was exposed to things like etiquette classes and things like debutante balls and cotillions and botillions. And I was in certain civil organizations very early on where you had to be well-spoken, well-mannered, have this well-rounded approach and outlook on life. And I think keeping like posture was a big thing, keeping your legs closed when you're wearing like a skirt or a dress, certain things about where you walk, where you wear your clothes, how long they have to be, not showing cleavage, all those sorts of things were somewhat feminine in one way, and then somewhat like a little bit misogynistic,
Mhm.
So, but when you're growing up and thinking about ways to be feminine, sometimes it's just the way you act. And there's nothing that you're doing differently than how you would normally be. But it's when you're messing up or you're back talking or you're doing things that aren't really becoming of a woman that it's like, you need to be more feminine or you need to be, more well mannered and be quiet. I was never quiet as a child. So that really has somewhat helped me in life. So if you get those marks on your report card as a young person of like talks too much, needs to exercise self-control, sometimes it's just you need to break out in your adult life. And sometimes that bodes very well. But in terms of like ladylike, that was kind of synonymous growing up as being more feminine and being more like a woman, if you will.
So the reason I ask, and Rakai, I'm ready to go, but the reason I ask is because masculinity and femininity to me are top of consciousness as a gay man. I'm always being graded on how masculine or how feminine I am. And what I'm hearing from both of y'all is first from you, Doc, that femininity to you, as you define it, is very different than femininity to me. You were talking more about the qualities of a woman when I'm talking about the qualities of a girl. And though, if you get the inflection, and even you, Lewis, you're talking about definitely a different level of masculinity. So I think that's really interesting. We got to take a break. Let's go to break. Okay, when we come back, the conversation continues. Since no one is 100% gay or 100% straight, we're going to find out where our guests fall on the spectrum of sexuality. This is Allies Explained. We'll be right back.
Clap your hands for this amazing opportunity to gather together.
It's almost here.
I Elevate National Conference. We are calling together innovators, creators, creatives, leaders, activists, advocates, disruptors.
A weekend of events, celebration, and fellowship. This is an event you don't want to miss.
July 12th through the 16th.
Visit ielevate.org to register. Welcome back to Dear Black Gay Men Live. So the spectrum of sexuality can be complex. If 100% same gender loving is over here on one side, and 100% other gender loving is over here on the other side, everybody, me, Doc, Lewis, all of us are somewhere in the middle. Our guests, Lewis and Marissa, will give us some insight on where allies fall on that spectrum, hopefully. If sexuality is a spectrum, where does gay community stop and straight community start? That's where we're starting, teammates. So you all identify as allies. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
So in your head, where does LGBT stop and allyship start? I'm gonna start with you, Doc.
So Jay, can I make a comment first?
Uh-oh, am I in trouble?
No, you're not. I accept the term ally for myself, but it's not one that I would term myself as. And I would just term myself as community, because my community doesn't stop with sexuality. It doesn't stop with gender identity. So I see how the term ally works and how it can be beneficial. But if I had my way, we would just all be community. That's all.
You better say that. See, and this is why you invited him. See, this is why community.
You see, I had to take a glass of wine. but go ahead, Doc. Give me your 2 cents, because I got a follow-up. But give me your 2 cents. Where is the line between the two groups?
Well, the thing is, when you're on a spectrum, that's like a very research, epidemiological based term that we use to kind of identify and be able to capture data. And a lot of times we are very stigmatizing from a research lens because we need to label things. And in order to capture the data that moves the policy that creates the change, we have to have certain labels. And so I think when we're talking about a spectrum, that is a unit of measurement, but that is not something that it can be fluid, right? Because there are gender fluid persons, there are sexually fluid individuals, and there are folks that have something called a gray area where they don't want to be defined by X, Y, or Z. And I think LGBTQIA plus communities are starting to continue to identify things that resonate with them the most. So I want us to be really careful when we're talking about the spectrum and really just think about this as an open conversation about identity, labels, and just this issue that we have specifically in the Black community with being able to identify and resonate with one another.
I received that on a cerebral level, but let me ask the follow-up for you, Doc. When you read or hear LGBTQ, do you feel like that term includes you?
No.
Why not?
Great question. Because I do not identify as being of the LGBTQIA plus community. I identify as being a cisgender, heterosexual, Black woman, period. I was assigned female at birth. I identify with what I was born with, and I identify as such. So when we're talking about the LGBTQIA plus community, that's a lot of the time when we are trying to reach those community members or when we're trying to collaborate with those community members, I am not the person that can be the subject matter expert. I call on my companions, my collaborators, my creative partners, my community, like Lewis said, to make sure the persons of lived experience and the persons that identify as such are at the table and can check us when we're wrong and check our biases, because we all have our own biases. But for me personally, when I hear that word or that term, no, I do not identify as such or feel like I am captured in that audience.
But aren't you the A?
No.
Okay, Lewis, aren't you the A? Isn't A allies?
I thought it was asexual.
Asexual.
Okay, then aren't you the plus?
I could be the plus. I mean, I think that I agree with Doc. I think that for me, I censor that line for me is at experience. And when I hear the term LGBTQ, I would say that I'm not a part of that community just because I don't have the same experience. And typically when we lump or label ourselves like that, there's a reason, there is a political agenda, there is some sort of work being done with that label. And sometimes that work can be to our benefit and sometimes it can be to our detriment. But I think it's important for us to, particularly when it's to our benefit, that when you are talking about people of the same lived experience, that you make sure that, or at least I'll speak for myself, that I make sure that I center myself around my privilege and my experience, which may be a lot different for somebody who identifies in this particular way. And so I need to understand that and respect that and make sure that my privilege doesn't overshadow somebody else's experience.
So I'm glad you mentioned privilege, because I'm going to say with you, Lewis. So when the show is called Dear Black Gay Men. So presumably everybody we're talking to is Black or Black adjacent, right? So given that context, what would you say your privilege, the top of consciousness privilege that you walk in is?
Oh, that I'm male. I think first privilege would be that I'm male. Next privilege as a Black man would be that I'm light skinned. And then in my head, the next privilege would be that I'm straight cisgender. Kind of both of those intertwined. So those are the kind of the layers of privilege that I work around with every day. And I try to keep at top of my mind, as particularly when I do the work that I do.
So interesting.
Your
That is
face.
so interesting.
Why is
Because
his face like that?
I would say that your privilege would be masculine.
I don't see
In gay
myself.
spaces. In gay spaces, you are, granted enough, what you see yourself with as and what others see you as are probably different, as they are different for me. But like, I see you as like a nigga, and I'm just like, that's the privilege. That's
So,
excuse my language if that offended, but
it don't. I'm from Harlem. I'm from the projects.
that's also the privilege. That's probably half the reason why you so masculine. Let me quit yelling in the mic. Okay, go ahead.
So I've never viewed myself as being a very masculine person, and it probably is because I grew up in a very hyper masculine environment, and I was never able to really fit that mold of hyper masculinity. And so I think that it's just really hard to see myself as an extremely masculine or a outstanding masculine figure, particularly also being light skinned, when light skinned people, at least in the United States, are seen as more feminine, more
Pretty.
docile, pretty, we're feminized a lot more. So I've been fighting that all my life, which is why it's kind of the second privilege after masculinity that always comes to mind.
Okay, so then the reverse, not the reverse, but kind of an adjacent question for you, Doc, is when you walk in spaces primarily populated with LGBTQ folks, do you have a sense of privilege? Because you're coming from a totally different perspective as a woman, and that has a whole different cultural context than being a man. So do you have a level of privilege in those spaces? Do you feel it or no?
I don't know that I necessarily feel it, but I know that it's there because I have the privilege of being highly educated. And I think for some that can be seen as being a know-it-all, or that's seen or taken in the wrong context. So I am very careful whenever we are having discussions specifically with community that I step back. They have a lot of communities trainings where we're talking about where you have folks that need to step up, step back, and making sure that I'm being reflexive of the information that I am sharing and not using these big terms that the community may not understand, and making sure that I'm meeting people where they are, but also just being, I'm a very tall woman at that. So being
yes,
tall,
you are.
I think,
and you be wearing them
being a
heels, child.
stallion, right? Being a stallion,
I be seeing you, girl. Okay, let me quit. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
But
You were saying something very profound, and I interrupted. My bad.
It's okay. But being a tall woman, I think also can be intimidating to some men, because they're like, dang, she's as tall as me, or she taller than me. She looks important. Let me figure out what she's about to say. But it's when we put pen to paper, or I open my mouth and I'm able to articulate, I'm able to spit the word, and everybody can understand, from those that are in academia, those that are in research, and those that are of community. And I think that those are the things that I am constantly trying to decipher and navigate, because as a woman of color, as somebody who is in a leadership role, and as somebody who is trying to be for and by and of the community and make sure our voices are heard and we have a seat at the table and all of those things, my identity is the first thing that enters a room. So it doesn't matter how many degrees and alphabets are behind my name. It has everything to do with how I articulate and who is going to listen.
Jay, can I make
Am I in trouble?
No. Why would you be in trouble?
Okay. Reflex. I be doing crazy shit sometimes, so I'm always in trouble. But go ahead.
I just want to state, like, we rarely hear about the benefits of somebody coming into a space that's not made for them and checking their privilege. And I just wanted to say, like, I would not be the man that I am today if it wasn't for the Black gay men, the trans women, the non-binary folks, the intersex folks, the asexual folks that I have in my life that have gotten me together, contributed to me, to my work professionally, contributed to me as a person and building me up. Like that all came from being able to check my privilege and to take a step back and just listen and to just shut up and find out about somebody's experience that may be totally different from mine. So I just want to say that.
So I'm gonna Rakai, I'm gonna change around the next segment, but we're about to take a break. Let's go to break. When we come back, we're gonna dive deeper into this conversation about allies. I'm going totally off script, Rakai, my bad, but we'll be right back. Let's take a break.
What up, though? The conversations stay lit on Dear Black Gay Men podcast. Hookup, entanglement, situation, relationship, everything from dushing to dating.
A top verb, but I am not a top noun. I am a guru at first dates.
It's new every Wednesday. Subscribe now.
Hey now, Rakai, you can add them back. So we are way off the script. I'm skipping whole sections of the script. And
what is the script?
I hope Rakai is going with me. I hope she's flowing with me, but we have skipped so much of it. But I really am curious about a totally separate topic, because we started at the top of the show talking about masculinity and femininity and how the two of you define those things is very different than what I have known masculinity and femininity to look like among gay folks, among gay men. And then you said checking your privilege. And so I really want to talk about, for a moment, I want to touch on, what does that look like? What did it look like when somebody checked your privilege as a masculine or feminine, cis, straight person in those spaces? Doing it so lovingly, because I will say that in my experience, when the young trans girls, literally the girls, trans women, check me now, it feels very. It hasn't been as constructive as it could have been. What did it look like for you? And Marissa, Dr. Marissa, I'll start with you. What did it look like for you? That moment where you realized that you had to check your privilege, and how did that come up in conversation or in forum?
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to tell a very short story, but I was a Peace Corps volunteer, and I served in Togo, West Africa as a community health and malaria prevention volunteer. And one of the things that we were taught in Peace Corps is to have cultural humility, and to do the psychology of sitting. And the psychology of sitting is this concept where when you go into a community, you observe, you listen, you make allies, you let people talk first. You don't come in with your ideas and your values and your tables and your charts and your data, and you just throw it at the community and tell them you're doing everything wrong. You need to sit with them and understand how they live. What are they doing? How do they come about those things? What are their challenges? What are their successes? All of those things before you come in with any sort of way to make ends meet. And I think that I have taken that and led with cultural humility of making sure when I go into spaces, I listen before I speak sometimes, not all the time, but a lot of times I will try to listen before I speak. But also when I'm occupying these spaces, I know I stand on the shoulders of some courageous people. And so they didn't get into these spaces with ease. And so being and acknowledging that and walking in that and being a daily reminder that it is possible to occupy these spaces, but being grateful that I am somebody that is privileged enough to be here is something that I don't take lightly.
Okay, Lewis, let's go to you before I interject.
Just building off of everything Marissa said, I think first and foremost for me, it starts with getting permission to share space or be in the space. You know, I was in a situation recently where I found myself in a space that I was asked to leave because it was a space that wasn't meant for me. And I identified that, hey, I'm a straight cisgender male. You know, do I have permission to be in this space? And I was told that, no, it's better that you leave. And so just having the humility to not hide and not shrink away from the privilege that I have and saying, I have this privilege. I understand that this space might not be for somebody who has this type of privilege. Do I have permission to be there? And I was checked and I was told that you should leave.
I have never heard that in my life. That was a first for me. The idea that you were, I'll say, man enough to acknowledge that this ain't for me. And then you could still be a full man and walk out of there and be like, okay, this ain't for me. Because in my experience, like there's a particular person in my head when I think about straight men in gay spaces, and he would be totally verklempt, like pearls clutched, ready to argue if he walked into a gay space and we was like, this ain't for you, friend. Mm-hmm. And the idea that you could do so, acknowledge that, hey, you got some level of privilege that many of other people in their space don't have, and respect the space enough to walk, like, mind blown.
It wasn't easy. I'll be honest. It wasn't easy. Not everybody liked the fact that I had waited that long because it was a space where people were sharing. And so I didn't want to interrupt to say, hey, I'm a straight guy here. Should I leave? Like, I thought maybe the best thing is just wait for an opportunity to speak that came to me. And so, you know, not everybody was thrilled with the fact that I stayed there so long, you know, but overall I got a lot of positive feedback. And it was one of those situations where the rubber meets the road in your allyship. Like, that's the one thing I've learned about if you're going to be an ally, co-conspirator, if you're going to be in community spaces with people with different lived experiences as you're going to encounter moments where it's your heart, your allyship is tested, and people are going to see the real from the fake.
Yep.
Okay. So let me ask one last question to both of you, because we get a lot of messages from straight people who are either experiencing some of the same things that we share on this show or are looking for opportunities to kind of amp up their allyship. So if there was a message that you could send to, you know, the straight girls, what would it be on how they can be a better ally? What is the first thing that you think they need to do? Doctor, I'm going to start with you on that one.
Sure. I think the first thing is having conversation, open and honest conversations with persons of lived experience. So we can't all sit in a space as cis-het straight women and have a conversation about gay women and think we're going to get anywhere in the conversation. If that's inclusion, if that's, you know, allyship, whatever, we can't not have the community voices of those that we're talking about at the table if we want to make a change. So I think that's the first step, is actually being open to having a conversation. So many people get, you know, oh, well, I'm not like that, so I don't want to talk to them, or I don't believe in what they're doing, or what. It's like, why is it your business what they do or who they love or what they go out and do on the weekends? That is none of your business. But if you are trying to create programs, create change, because specifically for me, I'm an HIV researcher. And there has been over 40 years of the HIV epidemic that has disproportionately impacted our community as a whole, Black people, period. No matter your gender, no matter your orientation, no matter your identity, it has disproportionately impacted us. And so if we're going to create change and create ripple effects, we have to start having these conversations, and we have to break down silos, address stigma, and be real. So it starts with having conversations and then thinking about what are the action items to make those changes actually happen. Is it policy? Is it research? Is it community programming? Is it funding? Is it podcasts? The community has to decide.
I got one of those.
Hello.
Okay, I'm again, comic relief. Got it. But so, Lewis, I think what I would love for you to focus on, same question, but I'm thinking more about aunties and uncles and cousins and friends who have a J, have a, you know, any number of LGBTQ plus people in their lives, and they just don't know what can they learn, do, say, figure out so they can better connect with, you know, relative loved one that they just don't understand.
My message would be to flow with the love. You may not know what it's like to be a gay Black man. You may not know what it's like to be a trans person, but 9 times out of 10, people know what it's like to love somebody, and they know what it's like to love somebody authentically. You know, there's songs out there, being in love is good for your health. You know, people know how to love people. And so that was my mantra when I came into this field. I didn't know what it was like to be a gay Black man. I was working on, as a community educator, on a study for Black gay men. And all I knew is I knew how to love people. I knew how to show love to people authentically. And so from there, here I am. And, you know, people, again, it kind of goes back to my last comment about authenticity. People know when you are really trying to show love. People are willing to work with you. People are willing to take your okay and show you how to make it good or how to make it excellent when it comes to how to love them. And so if you really have somebody if you have somebody in your life who you really care about, and you want to make sure that you give that person the love that they deserve, the love that you feel for them, let that flow with that and go with that, and let that guide you to listen and to do all the things that you need to show this person that you really do really love them. It's a process. It's not going to happen every day, but you keep it up. And, you know, I didn't have degrees before I began to like blossom in this work. The community taught me what I knew. I know about being inclusive and being culturally conscious and culturally aware. You know, it wasn't a degree program.
Period.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you both for that. We got one last break. Let's take a break. We'll be right back.
Hit the notification bell because we're going live.
Like that's the least of my worries. The size.
Oh, I think relationships are becoming more complex.
Tuesday and Thursday every week.
Welcome to Dear Black Gay Men Live
at 9 p.m. Eastern. Subscribe at youtube.com/@ Dear Black Gay Men.
I want to thank my guests, Marissa and Lewis, Dr. Marissa, put some respect on her name, and Lewis for joining me. Last week, check this out. Last week, I attended a conference where a friend to the show, Bishop O.C. Allen, he is a same gender loving pastor, and he sat down with Dr. Jamal Bryant to talk about the Black church. Dr. Bryant, who leads one of the largest Baptist churches in Atlanta, has said some of the same shit that all of us have heard. He has preached that gay is an abomination. God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, and blah, 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 blah. And I thought, sitting there seeing Bishop O.C. Allen and Dr. Bryant, that Bishop Allen was going to punch the hell out of Dr. Bryant. But what happened was
Jamal Bryant, one of the most prolific pastors here in Atlanta, he apologized to the gay community for the hate that he put into the world around sexual identity and expression. I was taken aback, caught off guard by the whole exchange. But then Dr. Bryant asked a question that I truly didn't expect. He said, are we, same gender loving people, that's who he's talking to, are we ready to forgive? I just heard this the other day, so I don't know if I have an answer for that. But dear Black gay men, are you ready? That was our show. I am Jay the Gentleman. That's at JAI the Gentleman on IG. If this episode made you feel a little more dope, be sure to subscribe on YouTube, like the video, and share it with someone who needs a dopeness reminder. Dear Black Gay Man podcast is new every Wednesday. You can stream it on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And then Dear Black Gay Men Live is new every Thursday. So follow at Dear Black Gay Men on socials so you never miss a thing. I am Jay the Gentleman. This has been Dear Black Gay Men Live, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.